Today on the Spiritual Reality Podcast, we're going to focus on several moves that President Trump has taken that have been deemed fascist, including his recent executive order on flag burning and using the National Guard to clean up Washington, D.C., and now looking to do the same in Chicago. These are big questions because throughout history, there have been times that Christians have kind of failed to call out fascist behavior, and it came at a high cost to everyone. And at the end, I'm going to touch on the great Cracker Barrel controversy of 2025. I'm your host, Jim Richmond. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share the podcast with someone else. Let's get to it. Okay, well, President Trump has made some moves lately that have been interpreted as dictatorial or fascist. And of course, to the left, everything he does is considered fascist. There are a couple of things that recently people are saying fall into that category. First of all, he signed an executive order that seems to violate the First Amendment that is designed to dissuade flag burning. Is what the executive order is about. And I've talked in the past about the biblical view of free speech on past episodes. You can go back and catch those. I think the concept of free speech is biblical. It mirrors the freedoms that God gave mankind starting all the way back in the Garden of Eden. And also it acknowledges that giving anyone the authority to decide which speech is okay and which speech is not going to go well, because it would be human nature to eliminate all criticisms of yourself and anybody who doesn't like the way you think. And so this is exactly what our founders were escaping, right? And so I'm 100% for free speech. People who are not for free speech, generally speaking, are almost never the good guys, right? So the flag burning issue has come before the Supreme Court a few times, and every time it has come up before the court, it has been ruled that this is a First Amendment protected action. This issue is so interesting because it feels like burning your nation's flag is treasonous, right? Like that just, if you're like me, you see it and it just makes your stomach turn. And you're just like, man, like I hate to see that. It feels like you're making a statement that this country is worthless. It needs to be dissolved. However, even speech that is treasonous in its intent is not considered treason. So you can be completely speaking against and even acting out something like flag burning, totally against the country, but it's not considered treasonous until basically you act on that and you begin to do acts of treason, acts that would possibly overthrow the government or endanger the government and endanger the country, national security, that kind of thing. Similar to the way that the Second Amendment ensures that the government can't step outside of its role, the First Amendment helps keep the government in check by allowing any and all criticism of the government. And so I personally hate to see anyone burning a flag. I think that it should be one of the things that brings us all together, right? I think that we should all be on board with the key principles of the United States, and I think that the flag represents that. So if you're burning a flag, it seems to me that you're sending a message that you don't respect the principles of the United States at all. And this is similar to our episode recently of whether Islam can be compatible with U.S. principles and Western civilization. If you have a problem with the foundational principles of the country, then it kind of feels like you should just go somewhere else, right? Like there are plenty of countries where they absolutely despise the foundational principles of the United States, and you would probably be more at home there. But again, those are my opinions, right? That's my perspective. Maybe somebody else thinks that we've gotten so far from our foundational principles that they think the flag now represents something that should be protested. And so, that's probably how our founding fathers felt about the British flag and in the Revolutionary War. So it's protected speech because, until you are actually actively trying to tear down the country or endanger the country or overthrow the country, it's not treason, and it's protected free speech. And so as much as many of us don't like it, we have to continue to support free speech, and we have to be very careful about making any exceptions. The Supreme Court pretty much ruled over the decades several times that the only speech that is not protected are direct threats or speech that is designed to incite people to commit specific acts of violence. So if you say, I want you to go out and I want us to go find this person and want us to go kill him. Well, like that is not protected speech, right? So those are the only exceptions, other than I guess you're not allowed to say go and peacefully and patriotically protest. Got a dig in there. So what does Trump's order actually say? Well, it starts out by just talking about that the flag deserves to be respected. And then it goes into this. It says, notwithstanding the Supreme Court's rulings on First Amendment protections, the court has never held that the American flag desecration conducted in a manner that is likely to incite imminent lawless action or that is in an action amounting to fighting words is constitutionally protected. So he says that if flag burning is somehow used to incite people to commit crimes, then it would fall under the fighting words kind of category and can be prosecuted. Now, I think that's a very tall order to prove, right? But he goes on to say, my administration will act to restore respect and sanctity to the American flag and prosecute those who incite violence or otherwise violate laws while desecrating this symbol of our country to the fullest extent permissible under any available authority. So he's still talking about acts of violence or that incite violence, and he's saying we're going to prosecute that to the fullest. It's almost like he's saying we can't prosecute the flag burning, but if it's connected to this other thing, we're going to make sure that you get prosecuted. It's really kind of hazy. And then in Section 2, the category there is measures to combat desecration of the American flag. It says the Attorney General shall prioritize the enforcement to the fullest extent possible of our nation's criminal and civil laws against acts of American flag desecration that violate applicable content-neutral laws while causing harm unrelated to expression consistent with the First Amendment. This may include, but is not limited to, violent crimes, hate crimes, illegal discrimination against American citizens, or violations of Americans' civil rights, and crimes against property and the peace, as well as conspiracies and attempts to violate and aiding and abetting others to violate such laws. So, again, he wants to prosecute those who are breaking our civil and criminal laws, but he says that he wants those prosecuted in a way that is consistent with the First Amendment. Again, he ties all kinds of violent acts to flag burning. And it's interesting, he mentions hate crimes. It almost feels like he's trying to create a patriotic hate crime. You know how, like with hate crimes, you murder somebody and you're in trouble for murder, but because you murdered somebody, if they can prove that it was motivated by discrimination, that kind of thing, then it's also a hate crime. It's almost like he's trying to create a patriotic hate crime here. So, just burning the flag is one thing. You can get away with that, but if you're burning the flag in commission of a crime, it's kind of like a hate crime against the country. It's this almost how this reads. In other words, and so. I guess the punishment would be more severe in that situation. Basically, this is just a huge nothing burger. I'm just going to be honest with you. The executive order says over and over that everything should be done according to the First Amendment. So until they prosecute somebody beyond what the First Amendment allows, this is really just trying to dissuade people from burning flags. Right? This is just a PR move, basically, to say, hey, we don't like people burning flags. And so I just don't see much there. As it is written, it doesn't really violate the First Amendment, but it's also virtually unenforceable. It doesn't really do anything. The one part that is enforceable, and we've seen this happen of sorts, is that if someone is here on a visa and they want to protest the country by burning the flag, or in some cases, as we have seen, they want to protest for terrorist groups that hate us, we don't have to keep them here. Right? Like in the same way that if somebody signed up for a visa and they said on there, like, hey, we support all the terror organizations that hate the United States, we would just deny the visa. We can also remove them if they begin to support those kind of things or disrespect our country or whatever while they're here. They're our guests. They don't have to stay if they disrespect the country. And so that's, that's one part of the executive order that I think probably is enforceable. If the execution of this order does begin to limit people's right to burn a flag that they own in a place where you're allowed to set a fire, then I think that we have to have a problem with it. And I make those two stipulations because I think a lot of times it's almost like flag burning is its own category. And because everybody says, oh, it's protected free speech, we never ask the question, are you allowed to set a fire in the middle of that street? If I choose to go downtown today and set a box on fire in the middle of the street, I could probably be arrested for something, I would say. So that's not a place where I'm allowed to set a fire, I don't think. And so is it a place you're allowed to set a fire, and do you own it, or are you destroying somebody else's property? I kicked around the proposal of just thinking through, is it possible that we can make this a separate category? It could be the one expression that's not covered by the First Amendment, that we just expect everybody to at least respect the principles of the United States if they want to live here. And, but I think that it's a slippery slope. And I do think it is for the greater good that we allow almost no exceptions. We've got the couple right now where if you're literally specifically inciting violence, that's a problem. But other than that, there aren't a lot of exceptions, and there probably shouldn't be. All right. Another thing that the president has been doing lately that is accused of fascism is that he has used the National Guard to get Washington, D.C. back under control and to clean it up. And now he's talking about using the National Guard to do similar things in Chicago. Not exactly the same. Now, again, he's accused of fascism, accused of being a dictator for doing this. Let's just talk a little bit about that word. It's a classic Princess Bride kind of thing. That word, you keep using it. I don't think it means what you think it means. It gets used all the time. It actually gets used by people who like fascism. The left lately has cried fascism over everything that they disagree with, and yet they talk constantly about, I think we should limit free speech and things like that. So it's like, But fascism is characterized by dictatorship, suppression of the opposition, like physical suppression, like locking up your political opponents, for instance, control of the media, and use of the military to do all those types of things. Here's what's interesting. If you really think about this, just think about it for a second. The left has so broken this country that taking the proper steps to fix it appear dictatorial. Just let that sink in for a second. They gambled on that. They said, you know what? Nobody has the guts to come in and do the hard things that it will really take. It's going to be so unpopular that we're going to put all this stuff in place and nobody's really going to want to fix it. We're going to have this tradition of this deep state, so to speak, the swamp where there's all these bureaucrats that run everything, and nobody's going to have the guts to say, wait a minute, you work for the executive branch, you're fired. Like nobody's going to have the guts to do that. It's going to be so unpopular. They allow millions of unvetted people into the country, which allows human trafficking and slavery and drugs and all kinds of terrible things. So now deporting people looks like a Nazi roundup, right? That's how it gets played in the news. And so it takes a lot of guts to actually do what needs to be done right now, because in order to fix it, it takes a very hard-charging, very definitive, quick decision maker, a person who sticks by their guns. And that's just something that is going to get spun every single time as hateful and controlling. They also run cities that are soft on crime. And it gets to the point that you need to bring the National Guard in to step in and restore order and sanity. And that makes the president, again, look like a dictator that sends the military in on his own people. The difference is he's not sending them in to attack those who oppose him. He's trying to bring safety back to those cities for the sake of the hardworking people who just want to work and live in peace. He's wanting to see the laws that we have enforced so that people don't have to live with crime. Of course, Washington, D.C. is a federal district, so he was able to be more aggressive, take more aggressive steps there than he can in other cities, but he's wanting to deal with the crime. And the mantra that we're hearing right now is, crime statistics are actually down in these cities. What is he even talking about? But the question still remains, are they safe? Like, down from terrible is still like not so good, right? And so I'm not sure why, other than for political reasons, these mayors of these cities are so adamantly opposed to the help. Listen to what the Bible says about this issue. Proverbs 11:10 says, "When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices, and when the wicked perish, there are shouts of gladness." When the people who are doing the right thing, they're rewarded, and the people who are doing the wrong thing are punished, people are happy because they know that they can go about their business and do what needs to be done. Proverbs 29:2 says, "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule." What happens when you don't prosecute crimes and you just let mayhem reign? The wicked are in charge, right? And it says, when the wicked rule, the people groan. Proverbs 29:16 says, "When the wicked thrive, so does sin, but the righteous will see their downfall." Eventually, he's saying that doesn't come to good ends. So these verses say that people become downtrodden, they become disillusioned if evil's not dealt with. They want to know that the laws will be enforced. It's basically the social contract of a civilized nation that we operate by, right? That I'll be a good citizen, I'll work hard to contribute to society, I'll pay my taxes, but I need to know that those who do wrong are not going to be allowed to get away with it. Now, I know that there are limits to what the president can do, and he can't fully overstep the authority of state and local governments. That is our federal system, and so we need to be careful about that. But there is precedence for a president using the National Guard for situations like this. In 1957, Eisenhower used the National Guard to enforce integration of schools in Arkansas. And President Johnson used the National Guard in 1965 to protect civil rights advocates and activists in Selma, Alabama. If nothing else, I think that the threat of deploying the National Guard is highlighting that these cities are not doing enough about crime and to keep their people safe, and it might cause them to take crime a little bit more seriously again. Well, finally today, I want to talk about this whole Cracker Barrel situation for a second. First of all, I just want to say this is not a very important issue. It's been a big deal over the last week, but I don't think this is really that important. Companies change logos all the time. There's been a lot of speculation that they took Uncle Herschel off the logo to distance themselves from whiteness. There is no direct evidence of that as of right now. Some of the reasons that people may feel that way is because if you go to their website, you scroll down to the bottom, you click on culture and belonging, you're going to see several DEI-focused initiatives. And Cracker Barrel has been involved in promotion of Pride events, such as the Nashville Pride sponsorship that they did in 2024. They've had past participation in the Out and Equal LGBTQ Workplace Advocate Conference. That just rolls off the lips. Where Cracker Barrel won a 2018 award for its LGBTQ plus Alliance ERG. They have drastically raised their rating that the Human Rights Campaign doles out over the last several years, which Human Rights Campaign was the creator of the equal sign that was pushing for gay marriage. So in a sense, they have given us plenty of reasons to be suspicious about any decision that they make. However, corporately, I can understand that they're between a rock and a hard place. Right? They've been in decline. So in a sense, you have to kind of figure out, like, how do we engage more customers and younger customers, because their main customer base might be dying off. So do they need to rethink their look? Like, do we need to kind of change up what the restaurants look like? I mean, just got to rethink your whole strategy, right? If things aren't going well. But on the other hand, their look and their environment and their country cooking were the only reasons that the people who were still going there were still going there. So you change up too much, and you've just basically torched your whole customer base. Now, of course, now they have announced they're changing the logo back. They're not going to stick with the new one. I don't know if that means that they're going to keep the look of their restaurants as well. I'm not sure about that. But if Christians want to stop supporting Cracker Barrel, there seems to be a lot of great reasons over the last decade to do so that are a whole lot greater than a logo change or removing washboards and ice skates off the walls. The current CEO is really not necessarily the problem. She's the symptom. They hired her because they already think and have been operating that way for a while now. And so as Christians, let me just say, I think we need to be careful about jumping on the bandwagon of whatever conservative commentators we're listening to. Most of the time, those conservative commentators turn out to be right about a lot of things. Let's just be honest. There's the joke that, I need new conspiracy theories. They've all come true, that kind of thing. And so a lot of times those folks are onto something, and the media is trying to hide it, and eventually it comes out, right? However, keep in mind that they also, these commentators, they make their money by keeping you stirred up about issues and by always having something to fight. So just keep that in mind. Like if it's a dull news day, they still have to find something to come up with. And so 20 years ago, Cracker Barrel would have just changed their logo and nobody would have thought anything about it. But now with social media and all of these commentators out there, criticism and conspiracy theory spread like wildfire. At this point, the reasons that they tried to change the logo and they want to redecorate their stores are just pure speculation. I don't even think we have a statement from insiders about this. We don't have some whistleblower saying, no, I sat in the meeting and they said X, Y, Z. We don't have that. And so for a Christian, speaking the truth and getting our facts right is really important. So let's not jump on the bandwagon, label something as woke if we don't know. Is this organization becoming increasingly woke? Honestly, I feel like there's a ton of evidence for that just on their own website and the initiatives that they've supported. Was this decision woke? We don't know. Right now, we don't know. And so as Christians, let's be very careful with the truth, right? Well, that is all the time we have this week. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a great Labor Day weekend, and we will see you next week.